Welcome back to our channel. Before we dive into yet another fascinating and mysterious stories, I would like to invite you to watch, to like, and subscribe to the channel. Also, activate the notification sound. Greetings, seeker of truth, listener, to the echoes of eternity. Today, I am guided to share with you the story of a man whose life was a tapestry woven with threads of cunning, fear, ambition, and profound encounters with the divine. A man who literally wrestled with God himself through a long dark night and survived it. You heard that correctly, Jacob, the patriarch of Israel. His journey involved supernatural visions that pierced the veil between worlds. He saw a ladder connecting heaven and earth. Thronged with celestial beings, he experienced a direct, physical, transformative confrontation with the Creator. But understand this, beloved soul. This is not merely an ancient tale, a dusty relic of religious history. No, hidden within Jacob's dramatic life lies an incredible secreta, timeless revelation about how God works, how He transforms lives, even today, how He can take a flawed, striving, often deceitful individual, and through struggle, grace, and relentless pursuit, mold him into a vessel of divine purpose. You will discover how a deceiver, whose very name meant supplanter, became Israel, he who struggles with God, the father of a chosen nation. And crucially, you will explore what this ancient wrestling match, this divine encounter, has to do with you, with your own struggles, your own potential for transformation. I sense the ending of this story, its deeper implications, may astonish you, may shift your perspectives, or stay present with me, journey alongside Jacob, because this is an exploration into the heart of grace, struggle, and divine encounter that you do not want to miss. Jacob's story begins not at his birth, but even before it, trapped in mystery, overshadowed by divine promise. His very conception was unique. Genesis chapter 25 tells us his mother, Rebekah, the wife of Isaac, endured a difficult, perplexing pregnancy. It felt unlike a normal gestation. The twins developing within her womb seemed locked in constant, violent conflict. They jostled, they struggled, they thrashed against each other, as if a battle for preeminence was already being waged in that sacred, hidden space. Genesis 25-22. Troubled by this unnatural internal turmoil, Rebekah did what souls seeking answers should always do. She inquired of the Lord. She cried out, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" And God answered her directly, unveiling a prophecy that would shape not only her family's future, but the destiny of entire nations, echoing down through millennia. "Two nations are in your womb," the divine voice declared, "and two peoples from within you shall be divided. The one people shall be stronger than the other people. The older shall serve the younger." Genesis 25-23. This was no ordinary prediction. It was a divine decree, a foreshadowing, revealing that Jacob's life story would be marked by divine intervention, unexpected twists, and a purpose far larger than he could initially comprehend. The natural order, the cultural expectation where the firstborn held all privilege, was being overturned by divine fiat. Before birth, the younger, Jacob, was designated for the primary blessing. The covenant lineage. Then, at the moment of their birth, we witness a scene rich with symbolism, a physical manifestation reflecting the persistent, striving, perhaps even grasping nature that would characterize much of Jacob's early life. Esau, the firstborn, emerged red and hairy, but then Jacob was born immediately after, his tiny hand clutching onto Esau's heel. Genesis 2:5. Esau. If, even in the act of birth, he was already striving, reaching, seeking advantage, trying to supplant his brother. His very name, Jacob Yaakov, in Hebrew, is related to the word for heel, and carries the connotation of he grasps the heel, he supplants, or he deceives. This seemingly simple physical act became a lifelong representation of his relentless pursuit of blessing, recognition, position, often through his own cunning and effort. Yet, even in this flawed, striving nature, God's purpose was at work even from his mother's womb, marked by struggle and prophecy. God was preparing Jacob for a unique, paradoxical mission. He was chosen, not for his perfection, but, despite his imperfection, He would become the patriarch of a sacred lineage. From his 12 sons would emerge the 12 tribes of Israel, God's covenant people. This dramatic, unconventional beginning highlights a profound truth. Even before we fully understand God's intricate plans, even amidst human weakness and struggle, He is sovereignly in control, weaving every detail, guiding every step, to ultimately fulfill His unwavering promises and His grand redemptive purpose. Jacob's life was destined to be a testament to God's surprising grace working through human frailty. As Jacob grew, his life took a decisive, morally complex turn. An episode unfolded that was filled with human ambition, deception, maternal maneuvering, yet simultaneously, paradoxically, served to advance God's pre-declared purpose. Genesis chapter 27 recounts the story of Jacob stealing the blessing intended for Esau's. Their father was now old, his eyesight failing, believing his death was near. He desired to bestow the patriarchal blessing, a powerful, prophetic impartation of spiritual authority, prosperity, and covenant promise upon his favored firstborn son, Esau. He instructed Esau to hunt game and prepare a savory meal, after which the blessing would be given. Rebekah, however, overheard this conversation, remembering the prophecy given to her before the twins' birth: the older shall serve the younger, and perhaps favoring Jacob, or believing she needed to help God's plan along, she devised a scheme, a plan rooted in deception. She urged Jacob to impersonate Esau and claim the blessing for himself. Genesis 27. Says des, Jacob initially hesitated, fearing his father's curse if discovered, but Rebekah insisted, even taking any potential curse upon herself. Genesis 27:11-13, under his mother's determined guidance. Jacob participated in the charade. He wore Esau's best clothes to carry his scent. Rebekah covered his smooth hands and neck with the skins of young goats to mimic the hairy feel of his rugged brother Esau. He brought the savory food his mother had prepared to his blind, aged father. The scene that follows is poignant, almost painful to read. Isaac is suspicious. The voice sounds like Jacob, but the hands feel like Esau. Genesis 27-22, he questions Jacob repeatedly, "Are you really my son, Esau?" Genesis 27-24, Jacob lies directly, "I am Isaac." Deceived by the physical sensations, proceeds with the blessing the moment Isaac, unsuspecting, pronounced the blessing upon Jacob is profoundly revealing of its perceived power. See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven, and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you. Genesis 27-27-29. This was more than just well wishes. It was believed to be a divinely potent prophecy, an irrevocable transfer of spiritual authority, leadership, prosperity, and covenant headship. In that moment of deception, God's prophesied will, the younger prevailing, began to unfold. Yet through deeply flawed human means, a paradox of grace and human failing, this victory, however, secured through deceit, came at an immediate and terrible cost. Shortly after Jacob received the blessing and left, Esau returned from his hunt, prepared the meal, and came eagerly to his father. The discovery of the deception was devastating. Trembled violently, Esau let out a great and bitter cry. Genesis 27-33-34. The blessing, once given, was considered irreversible. Isaac could only offer Esau a secondary, lesser blessing, tinged with conflict. Esau's reaction was not just grief, but intense, murderous fury directed at his brother. He swore a deadly oath, nursing his hatred. "The days of mourning for my father are approaching. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." Genesis 27-41. Rebekah learned of Esau's threat, and her plan, born of perhaps misguided faith or maternal favoritism, now forced her beloved son Jacob into exile. To save his life, Jacob was forced to flee his home, his family, the land of promise, sent away to Haran, the distant land of his mother's relatives, the land of his uncle Laban's flight, born of fear and the consequences of sin, both his and his mother's. marked the beginning of a long, arduous journey for Jacob, a journey away from the blessing he had deceptively obtained. A journey into hardship, servitude, further deception, this time directed at him by Laban, but ultimately, a journey designed by God to strip him, refine him, transform him, a journey that would be punctuated by profound supernatural encounters, challenging trials, and ultimately, lead him back to face his past, his brother, and God himself in a transformative encounter. The deceiver was now the fugitive, embarking on a path towards becoming Israel, fleeing the imminent danger posed by Esau's murderous rage. Jacob found himself utterly alone, a fugitive in the wilderness. He had nothing but the clothes on his back, a staff in his hand, and the heavy weight of uncertainty, fear, and perhaps guilt pressing upon his soul. He had secured the blessing. Yes, but through means that fractured his family and forced him into exile. He was heading towards an unknown future, in a distant land. It was in this precise moment of extreme vulnerability, isolation, and perhaps desperation, stripped of his familiar surroundings, his family support, his own clever schemes, that God chose to break into Jacob's reality, to reveal himself in one of the most profound visions recorded in Scripture. Genesis chapter 28 describes the scene. Exhausted from his journey, as night fell, Jacob lay down to sleep in a desolate place, using a rough stone as his pillow. Genesis 28-11, a hard bed for a man accustomed to tents, a stark symbol of his current state during that night, adrift between fear and uncertainty. He dreamed, but this was no ordinary dream fueled by anxiety. This was a divine revelation. He saw a magnificent stairway, or perhaps a ladder, set up on the earth, and its top reached all the way into heaven itself. And behold, upon this stairway, angels of God were ascending and descending. Genesis 28-12, celestial messengers moving freely between the earthly realm and the heavenly realm. Then, standing above it, or perhaps beside him at its summit, was the Lord himself, Yahweh, the God of his fathers, Abraham and Isaac. Genesis 28-13, and God spoke directly to Jacob, the fugitive, the deceiver, the vision of the stairway at Bethel, meaning house of God. The name Jacob would give the place was not merely a beautiful or strange celestial was saturated with powerful symbolic meaning. It represented the vital connection, the open pathway between heaven and earth. It visually demonstrated that God was not distant or inaccessible. Even to a flawed man alone in the wilderness, it signified God's active involvement in earthly affairs, his messengers carrying out his will. Centuries later, Jesus himself would reference this imagery, applying it to his own person, telling Nathanael, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." John 1:51. Jesus is the true ladder, the ultimate mediator, the bridge reconnecting heaven and earth, God and humanity. Jacob's dream was a profound foreshadowing of Christ's role. Furthermore, in this dream, God did not rebuke Jacob for his deception. Instead, he reaffirmed the covenant promise. He identified himself as the God of Abraham and Isaac, linking Jacob firmly to the covenant lineage. He restated the promise of the land. "The land on which you lie, I will give to you, and to your offspring." Genesis 28-13. He reiterated the promise of innumerable descendants. "Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south." Genesis 2:14. And he repeated the ultimate purpose of this covenant. "And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed." Genesis 28:14. This pointed towards the future Messiah who would come through Jacob's line. Finally, God gave Jacob a personal promise of presence and protection for his journey. "Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you, until I have done what I have promised you." Genesis 28-15. What astonishing grace! To the deceiver, the fugitive, God offers not condemnation, but covenant confirmation and personal assurance. When Jacob awoke from this dream, the impact was immediate and overwhelming. He was filled not with relief, but with profound reverence. "Da, even fear, holy fear," he exclaimed. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid, saying, How awesome, dreadful, fearsome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. And this is the gate of heaven. Genesis 28:16-17. He recognized he had encountered the living God. That this desolate spot was sacred ground. In response to this encounter, Jacob took the stone he had used as a pillow, set it up as a memorial pillar, and poured oil on it. Consecrating the place, he named it Bethel. House of God, Genesis 28:18-19, and Jacob made a vow, a commitment, responding to God's promises. If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house, and of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Genesis 28:20-22. This vow, while perhaps still containing elements of Jacob's bargaining nature, if then, marked a significant step, an acknowledgement of God's reality, a commitment to worship and honor Him. Based on the gracious promises God had just freely given him, the journey of transformation had begun. Initiated by divine encounter in a place of utter desolation after years spent in exile in Haran, enduring arduous labor and the cunning deceptions of his uncle Laban, Jacob had prospered significantly. God had blessed him. Just as promised, he now had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel, concubines, 12 sons, the future heads of the tribes, a daughter, and vast flocks and herds. He felt the divine prompting. It was time to return to his homeland, the land promised to his fathers. Genesis 13. However, this return journey carried a heavy weight, a significant challenge overshadowing the joy of homecoming, the inevitable reunion with his estranged brother Esau. 20 years had passed, but the memory of Esau's murderous rage, born from the stolen blessing, still loomed large. Jacob did not know how Esau would receive him. Would time have healed the wound, or would Esau seek revenge? Amidst the natural anxiety, the strategic planning, the fear of what awaited him back in Canaan, God, in His faithfulness and mercy, provided Jacob with another glimpse of divine reality, another assurance of heavenly protection. Genesis chapter 32 verses 1 and 2 describe this singular, encouraging moment. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him, and when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's camp host, army. So he called the name of that place, Mahanaim. Name itself means to camps or to hosts. Jacob recognized the presence of a heavenly army, a divine encampment alongside his own earthly camp, his family, servants, flocks. This vision, this encounter with the angelic host, served several crucial purposes at this juncture. Powerfully reinforced the promise God made at Bethel years earlier. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. Genesis 28:15. It demonstrated that Jacob was not traveling alone, vulnerable only to Esau's potential wrath. He was accompanied, surrounded, protected by the invisible, yet utterly real forces of heaven. God's army was with him. It served as a reminder of the divine purpose overarching Jacob's life. He was the bearer of the covenant. Under heaven's special care and protection, the presence of God's angels testified that the promises made at Bethel were still in effect, still being fulfilled. They symbolized the heavenly favor, the divine resources available to him. Even as he faced moments of intense human fear and uncertainty, this encounter with the angels at Mahanaim was not merely a passive gesture of comfort. However, it seems intended to bolster Jacob's faith, to encourage him to trust God more fully as he approached the reunion with Esau. Yet, Jacob's immediate reaction reveals his ongoing struggle between faith and fear, between relying on God and relying on his own strategies. Despite seeing God's angelic army, Jacob's fear of Esau remained palpable. He immediately began to prepare strategically, perhaps even manipulatively, for the meeting. He sent messengers ahead to Esau with conciliatory words, referring to himself as Esau's servant. Genesis 32:4-5. When the messengers returned, saying Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. Genesis 32:6-7. His fear led him to divide his camp, his family, and possessions into two camps, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. Genesis 32:7-8. Ironically, his strategic division mirrored the name of the place where he had just seen God's two camps. Mahanaim. He saw God's provision, but still relied heavily on his own fearful planning. He then offered a heartfelt prayer to God, acknowledging God's promises, confessing his fear, and pleading for deliverance from Esau. Genesis 32:9. Following his prayer, he prepared an extravagant gift, wave after wave of livestock, to be sent ahead to appease Esau's potential anger. Genesis 32:20. Jacob's actions reveal a man still wrestling with fear, wrestling with his past, wrestling with trusting God fully. He saw the angels, he prayed earnestly, yet he still relied heavily on human strategy and appeasement. The vision at Mahanaim was a gracious encouragement, a reminder of heavenly resources, but Jacob hadn't yet fully integrated that truth into the core of his being. He hadn't yet fully surrendered his own striving. A deeper, more personal, more transformative encounter was still needed, an encounter that would take place that very night, alone, by the river Jabbok, encounter that would change his name, his walk, and his destiny forever. Mahanaim was the prelude. Peniel would be the climax. Jacob limped away from that night, changing it, just in body, but in identity. He went in as Jacob, the schemer. He came out as Israel, the one who struggled with God and prevailed. That limp was proof he had been touched by the divine, proof that his struggle wasn't pointless, it was holy. And maybe, just maybe, that's what your struggle is, too. You see, God isn't afraid of your wrestlings. He's not distant in your dark night of the soul. He's in it, fighting with you, not to destroy you but to reveal you, to rename you, to bless you. Jacob didn't win because he was stronger, he won because he refused to let go. He clung to God, bruised, broken, desperate, and said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Can you say the same? What if your pain is not punishment, but preparation? What if the wrestle is where you receive your name, where your identity is refined, where heaven writes a new story over your life? Jacob met God face to face, and so will you if you don't let go. This is more than a story in Genesis. This is your story. The moment you feel like you're in the dark, alone, and wrestling with something you can't even name, that might be the moment God is closest, not to defeat you but to define you. So today, hold on even when it hurts, especially when it hurts, because just beyond the struggle, there is a blessing, and your new name is waiting.